I hear some sound in some of the podcasts of the wind. Unfortunately, living without AC requires that I leave the window open, but this season has been very, very strong in terms of winds here in Mumbai. Nonetheless, you notice that in these podcasts from this book, People of the Earth, climate is not the major focus. It's much more of a story of how civilizations and so on evolved over these timescales we are talking about from the other book. So we'll go back to climate once we finished with this book. So let's just keep running through the Holocene civilizations, and then you can try to connect back to the climates that we're discussing in other podcasts from the main book, right? So quickly run through ancient Egypt, Ethiopia, and Nubia. So you have here extent of Aksumite kingdom in Ethiopian region, and in the Nile Delta you of course had the Egyptian kingdom and Nubia around here. So the spread of the Upper Egyptian Proto-Kingdom through the Nile Valley circa 3300 BC is shown here, and this is a gross simplification of a very complex and ever-changing political situation. So the proto-kingdom of the Upper Egypt, kingdom of This and kingdom of Nekhen, kingdom of Nakara. Nakara is here, Nekhen is here, and so on and so forth. Obviously, there have been various geopolitical reorganizations there. So again, looking at the years here from 500 BC right up into 8 AD 1500, we are looking at the various regions, and at the bottom innovations. So you can just place this in context. First, iron in Nubia and tropical Africa around 500 BC, discovery of the monsoon winds, which was critical for the trade, the sailing Arabian Arabs going to India and back discovered the monsoon. In fact, monsoon is an Arabic word, mausam, which means season. Camel revolutionizes Saharan trade, and West Africa supplies most of Europe's gold in the more colonial periods starting around 1000 AD. Okay, so here Europe, Latene, and Mediterranean, Rome, Christianity came along. You know the battles there. Egypt, so the late period Egypt and the Ptolemies coming into AD 1 and beyond. In Nubia you had Napata and Meroe, and in Ethiopia you had the Aksum that we just looked at the map. North Africa had so Ethiopia and North Africa together here, and West Africa, the coming of iron here by 500 BC, and Geno, I don't know whether it's pronounced Heno, Islam in North Africa. So I have a separate podcast about the droughts and instability in terms of social rules and evolution of Islam. Again, environmental determinism kind of idea. But there was Saharan gold trade happening, Mali trade happening much more recently in the last millennium, Ghana, Saharan gold trade, Songhai. So the Portuguese explorations happened here, the age of discovery as well. East and South Africa, Southern Africa had pastoralists in East Africa, and coming of Iron Age here and agriculture by AD 1, expansion of the Indian Ocean trade with the discovery of the monsoon, and the Great Zimbabwe, Islam on the coast arriving, and Kilwa here. In South Asia and Southeast Asia you had the bronze using cultures already appearing by 500 BC, and in China the Zhou warlords were already having access to iron in Nubia and tropical Africa. Wow, that's just the timing. Unification, the Han dynasty here. So the sea trade between India and Southeast Asia, many Indian emperors expanded all the way into Southeast Asia, Buddhism, Hinduism, and so on. Funan, Chandla, Khmer civilizations in Southeast Asia, and so on and so forth. So kind of a quick run through the various civilizations between 500 BC and about 1500 AD. The ancient Egyptian civilization, specifically going back to circa 3150 BC to 30 BC, we had unification of Egypt under Narmer, so Menes, Archaic period 3100 to 2575, Old Kingdom extending from 2575 to 2180 that we talked about, First Intermediate period 2180 to 2040, 2040 to 1640 the Middle Kingdom, and then the Second Intermediate period from 1640 to 1640 to 1530 BC, New Kingdom from 1530 to 1070 BC, and the late period from 1070 to 332. 330 to 330 BC was the Ptolemaic period, and then the Roman occupation by 30 BC. Looking at the characteristics, going again back from the past to the present, consolidation of the state treated as part of the Old Kingdom in this book. Despotic pharaohs build the pyramids and favor conspicuous funerary monuments, institutions, economic strategies, and artistic traditions of ancient Egypt are established in the Old Kingdom. And the First Intermediate period is associated with political chaos and disunity. Thebes achieves prominence, also the priesthood of Amun during the Middle Kingdom, and the Second Intermediate period had Hyksos rulers in the Nile Delta. New Kingdom characterized by great imperial period of Egyptian history with pharaohs buried in the Valley of Kings. Pharaohs include Ramses II, Seti I, and Tutankhamun, as well as Akhenaten, the heretic ruler. The late period has a gradual decline in pharaonic authority, culminating in Persian rule around 524 to 404 and 343 to 330 BC. Okay, the Ptolemaic period brings Greek influence to Egypt, beginning with the conquest of Egypt by Alexander the Great in 332 BC. Alexander the Great also came to India. Egypt becomes an imperial province of Rome by 30 BC. Okay, so here are the map. Here's the map showing the extent of Bantu Africa and indigenous states mentioned in the book about tropical Africa. So we are away from Egypt now into rest of Africa. So here is the Congo forest and various dates at which the Portuguese explorations happened. Iron here was by AD 300. Great Zimbabwe we mentioned, Lamu, Kilwa, the trades along the Indian Ocean routes. West Africa, the Portuguese arrived by 1470, so Mali, Ghana, Timbuktu, Songhai, and so on. Iron was here by 500 BC. The Saharan trade routes were already there through from the north as well, and of course discovery of the monsoon and trade with India and so on from the Egyptian and the Ethiopian civilizations. So ancient Egyptian civilization arose out of complex processes of forced and voluntary integration along the Nile River Valley. This process was accelerated by increasing trade contacts with Southwest Asia, culminating in the emergence of ancient Egyptian state in about 3100 BC. Egyptologists conventionally subdivide ancient Egyptian civilization into four main periods: the Archaic and the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, New Kingdom, and the Late Period, the first three of which were separated by brief intermediate periods of political chaos that we just mentioned. I got severe allergies. The monsoon creates must on all the clothes and so on, so you end up with a headache with that. The Old Kingdom was notable for its despotic pharaohs and its frenzy for pyramid construction, an activity that may be connected with pragmatic notions of fostering national unity. Still happens with big statues and so on. The Middle Kingdom saw a shift of political and religious power to Thebes and Upper Egypt. New Kingdom pharaohs made Egypt an imperial power with strong interests in Asia and Nubia. Ancient Egyptian civilization began to decline after 1000 BC, and Egypt fell under Roman rule by 30 BC. Nubia, upstream of the first cataract, was exploited by the Egyptians for centuries, but it came into its own as the pharaoh's power declined. Nubian kings from Kush actually ruled over Egypt in the 8th century BC, but they were forced to retreat to Meroe, far upstream 2 centuries later. Meroe became a center for the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean trade, ruled by kings and queens who preserved Egyptian customs. It prospered until the 4th century AD, when it was conquered, finally eclipsed by the kingdom of Aksum, centered on Ethiopian highlands. The camel opened up Sahara to regular gold and salt trade, fostering the development of powerful West African states such as Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. At the same time, expanding Indian Ocean trade nurtured a network of trading towns on the East African coast. During the 14th and 15th centuries AD, Great Zimbabwe in southern Africa controlled much of the gold and ivory trade in southeastern Africa. Okay, let's just summarize the South and Southeast Asian civilizations quickly as well. We have another podcast on the at least a couple of podcasts on agriculture in the Indian subcontinent and feedbacks to the monsoon, and also Southeast Asia and civilization and species surviving the Toba volcanic eruption around 74,000 years ago, and so on. So I'm just mixing various regions and time scales here. So in this context of civilizations, let's just read through the summary of South and Southeast Asian civilizations. State-organized societies on the Indian subcontinent developed from indigenous roots in about 2600 BC. The Indus civilization of the lowland Indus Valley developed possibly as the result of a major shift in Sumerian long-distance trade patterns and long-term interactions between the Indus culture of the lowlands and the Kulli complex of the Baluchistan highlands. Indus civilization flourished along the Indus for about 1,000 years. It was an unborn society with many smaller satellite settlements, carefully planned and ruled by priest kings who controlled both religious and economic life. So the state and religion were well mixed here, with the control lying with the priests kings. After 1700 BC, the major cities went into decline, but Indus society flourished in rural settings for a considerable time. So this is the debate about whether civilizations collapse or they just decline and then disappear or merge. The center of economical and political gravity moved eastward to the Ganges River Valley, culminating in the Mauryan Empire of the first millennium BC. Southeast Asian peoples had developed bronze working at least 1500 by at least 1500 BC. The process of forming local states, or the mandalas, began around the same time, but the first historical records of complex state date to the 3rd century AD. Many such states developed in and around the central Mekong Valley and later in the central Cambodian basin. So we are moving to Southeast Asia now. There, after AD 802, flourished the flamboyant Khmer civilization, a society based on divine kingship and strong nations of conformity. So how you usurp power or assume power, how you unite people may depend on invoking religion, religious power, divine kingship, and so on and so forth, which still happens, right? After 6 centuries of spectacular development, the Khmer civilization came in contact with the expanding Islamic trade network and new religious doctrines, which caused its partial demise. Okay, so leave this here and then come back and look at the New World, China and the New World, before concluding the civilizations from people of the earth. Okay.